Okay, so this is Zoom class number 2 of the Constellation Training 2019-20 on November 12th. We still don't have video. I'm gonna unmute Serena and Kelly. Okay, there's Serena, she's coming in. And Kelly, can you at least hear us? Go ahead and speak.
Yes, I can.
Excellent. Okay, and you will join us video-ishly when you can.
Yeah, I'm just listening because I'm on my way home.
Okay, good, excellent, great, thank you. Okay, folks. Hello.
Hello.
So let's just take a moment.
Hello.
And Kelly, please don't do this too much if you're driving. But everyone just take a moment. Come here. Even, you know, if it serves you, not Kelly again, but if it serves you to close your eyes, take a few breaths. Connect with the group, with yourself, your ancestors. Okay, come on back. I've been hearing, I've been meeting with some of you, which is great. Thank you. Keep making your one-on-one coaching session appointments. If you're in the business integration, you should have had 2 by now, 2 coaching sessions. You should be having them approximately every other week or so. And if you are not, then about once a month. You should have 1 done and maybe 1 scheduled-ish, give or take. But I've been hearing from people that y'all are doing your study group. Woohoo! And I'm so glad you're doing it. It can be a little raw sometimes. You know, Constellation's work is by its nature vulnerable both for the client and for the facilitator, right? Different kinds of vulnerability, but you're both being vulnerable. And then whoever's representing has to be present to that atmosphere of vulnerability. So it's touching everybody. And I just want to check in. I did send out an email when I got a sense of some of the ways in which it's been a little challenging. I hope that was helpful. The reminder around containers and structure, even when it's a little informal. And also to be curious about, you know, if things are feeling odd or off, to think systemically about it. You know, any chance everyone's tired or, you know, what else might be going on rather than that person's a jerk, you know. That you can, you know, think systemically about stuff. So I just wanted to check in. How's it going? Grace just implied that there was another one recently because Anna was reporting about her mom. How did that go? Just a moment or two to share about that. Let me know how it's going, or any questions or concerns.
I think the group is going great. I haven't felt this me personally, I haven't felt this in any raw place. It's been a love fest and we're learning a lot. For me, it generates a lot of questions, which I won't ask right here, but the practice is generating tons of methodology questions, which is good.
Exactly what it should be doing. Excellent. And existential questions about life, the universe, and everything. Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Anything else about study groups, observations, thoughts, questions? I just wanted to give this a minute today because we're not going to see each other for almost a month.
Can you hear me?
Is that Kelly?
Yeah. Yeah.
Kelly, your audio is very broken up. I think until you settle down, you might not be able to join with audio.
Okay.
Yeah, we can't understand you, Kelly. So if you've got a question or a comment, just bookmark it. We can get to it once you settle down someplace, okay? But thank you for trying to share your thought or question, whatever it might be. Anything from the other folk with a little bit more reliable audio?
I can share.
Yeah.
I noticed that when I'm to facilitate, because I know that everybody else is, like a facilitator to be, I tend to, if I'm confused, I tend to ask somebody else to facilitate or help me facilitate with me. And I don't, like, I struggle with taking the full responsibility of facilitating.
Yep. Bring that to your one-on-one coaching session.
Okay.
And by the way, don't you love that phrase, the full responsibility, given that we're going to be talking about the orders of helping today?
Yeah.
It's relevant, right? The way that you're carrying this or holding this could be relevant to what we're going to be talking about today. Having said that, I want to continue to honor, and this is something I've thought a lot about, that group constellation facilitating at the level of mechanics, I don't think it's the hardest thing in the world, but in terms of performance, it can be very challenging. You're very naked. There's no procedure. There's no first you do this, then you do this, then you do this, or only just vaguely. You have to, in a sense, make it up as you go along, and you're doing it in front of a group of people who you want to satisfy somehow. And so that tends I have it. I had it the other day. No one here is in my new little short support group series, but I had like 20 people on the call on Tuesday, and all my performance anxiety came up, just was right there again. And I just sort of went, I'll be okay. I'll just ride the pony until I calm down. And I have enough experience in myself and my nerves to know I would get through that. And the more you do it, the more you know that you'll get through your nerves. You will. And you'll be able to settle down. As you go along, I'm going to ask the fellow students to support Dinka. When she turns to you for help, instead of stepping in with your great facilitator idea, think of a question. Now, there's a few good ones I like when I'm coaching someone in the middle of constellating and they're doing that deer in the headlight thing, and they turn to me and they go, help, right? Some version of that, right? First of all, I might just say, take a second and be with yourself. What are you noticing? So that's not a question, it's more of a direction. But a question could be, what was the last thing you knew? For sure. What do you see now? What might you like to try? Now, this is not just for Dinka. This is something you can do for all of each other. If someone is in a moment of, I need help, instead of stepping in with, because here's the thing, there's no one better at facilitating a constellation than the person who is not facilitating. Because you have none of the pressure, right? Dinka, have you been watching someone do it and you're like, I know what to do now? Of course you do, right? We're really brilliant when we don't have to be tracking 20 things, when we're not dealing with our nerves, when it's not really on us to help the person. And so if someone asks you for help, you probably have a good idea about what to do. I'm going to ask you to try and refrain from doing that for each other. Within limits, obviously. If Dinka says, God damn it, I need an idea and I need it now, then by all means, help her out. But again, just those kinds of questions. Yeah. And then they start to get internalized. Yeah. Because we all have these deer in the headlight moments. Yeah, Grace.
Could you just go back? I kind of missed him. I really want to take it down because I like him. I got the take a second, be with yourself, and the what's the last thing you knew for sure. Can you remind me of what the next couple questions were?
I just made up these questions. I'm sure you could make up 2 or 3 more, but what do you see now?
Okay.
And something like, what might you like to try? What would you like to try? Or what were you thinking you might try?
Okay. Thank you.
know, yeah. Because often, someone has like they're going, oh, I think I may bring the brother in. It isn't quite fully aware. Instead, they're doing and if someone says, what were you thinking you might like to try? And you could say, well, I was thinking about bringing the brother in. Okay, go for it. Yeah. Sometimes we need that question to kind of bring the thoughts and ideas to the surface that we actually have there, but we're not. A lot of facilitator confidence comes from noticing what you're noticing. This is something that Grace as a organizational consultant has to do all the time. Like she's interviewing co-founders and she's noticing there's some tension in the interaction that that we would all notice, but we might not notice it. We might not do anything with it, but she's tracking it, right? Because that's really useful information. If you're in a business meeting and everyone's trying to plow through an agenda, yeah, because we have an agenda and we have a thing we have to get to, and halfway through someone says, you know what? There's something off in the room. What the heck is going on? Everyone knew that, but they were just plowing through the agenda, right? So a big part of what we're up to here is just noticing what we're noticing. Yeah? Wow, I'm getting cranky. Or all of a sudden, I want to give up, or, or, oh, I've been thinking about the brother the last few minutes, huh? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Judith, I see you're about to say or ask something.
Are you done with this part? Because I have a question.
Yeah.
So my question is about the time envelope for a constellation.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Say more about the question,
Okay,
but
so in general, what do you allow for? Is there a normal that you set up, whether group or individual? And there have been times where we've met as a group and we have time for a short one.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't get finished.
Right.
And
yeah.
So, yeah, if you could just speak to that, that'd be helpful.
So there's no way to do this perfectly. At the end of the support group that I did yesterday afternoon, I had like 10 minutes to do something real short. And I asked the group if they had an issue that sort of would fit into that. Mm-hmm. And the gods were good to me, and it was a 5 to 10 minute thing. It was awesome. But I easily could have gotten into something that, it happens, right? Mm-hmm. However, there is some intention. So when I was listening to her, I could hear about 10 different levels that I could have gone after. And I didn't have time to interview her or find out more about it. So it was kind of a business thing. So I just set up the elements of the business. Boom, 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 boom. I asked the representative for the client what their experience was. That was pretty much it. Turned to the person who had put out the issue. I said, "You got your insight?" And she said, "Yep, I got my insight. Thank you."
Wow.
You know, so it wasn't life changing. It was just
Mhm.
a little insight into how it was a situation where she's got a group of colleagues trying to do something together in constellations, and they're not getting clients. So I just set up the colleagues, and I set up
Mhm.
the client, and the client and the colleagues kind of reported how it was to be with each other. And that was all she just needed to
Mhm.
see and hear that.
Mhm.
Right
Mhm.
now, is there maybe a deeper conflict amongst the colleagues? That's possible. I
Mhm.
wasn't going to go there.
Mhm.
Didn't have time for that.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
So part of it is knowing your container, knowing your frame, how much time you have available, how many people you have to represent, how new the people are, how quickly they can get to stuff. Yeah, all those things. And then there's two ways to set the timer a bit.
Mhm.
It's not something you can do perfectly, but a bit. One is what I just modeled, which is only look at as much as you have time to look at.
Mhm.
And if someone says, if I said, "What's a 10-minute issue?" and someone had said, "I have lifelong depression," I would have said, "I'm really sorry, but we can't look at that right now."
Yeah.
I just wouldn't have done that to them. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Now it was a group of Constellation folks, so they knew better than to do something like that, right? Someone came up with something that was, so when you have that with each other, my friends, please deliver an issue that's small chunk size, right?
Mhm.
That's got a kind of a simple dynamic. I'm going to a wedding next week. My cousin, who I haven't spoken to in 5 years, is going to be there. I'm nervous. Can we just look at that?
Mhm.
Oh, we can look at that in 5 to 10 minutes, right?
Mhm.
So set it up in a way that it's not humongous. Now that will not prevent the field from bringing, you set up the cousin, and the next thing you know, the representative for the cousin is looking at the floor and going, "There's someone dead." And you're like, "Oh shit." And you just turn to the person and you say, "Well, apparently your cousin has some issue with someone who has died.
Mhm.
Does that make sense to you?"
Mhm.
"Oh yeah, her husband just died." "Oh, well, apparently this is relevant to what's going on between you and your cousin." Or they say, "No, I have no idea." And you'll say, "Well, I don't either."
Mhm.
And you let it be.
Mhm.
Because that's all the time you have time for.
Mhm.
So, or if you have an hour, or you have 5 hours, by and large, I try not to have and this is, I have a artificial limitation, which has kind of trained me. 3-hour evening, 2 constellations. That means constellations are 1 to 1.5 hours. That's just, I'm looking at the clock and I'm saying, we got to wrap this up. We've done what we can do. The thing is, once you get much past an hour and 15 minutes, an hour and a half, the system gets tired. The people literally get tired. You get tired. The client gets tired. The system gets tired. So even if you're doing a day-long event, you're going to do 6 constellations. And I know people who do, Dan and Emily Cohen are famous for their 3-hour-long constellations. I do not do this because people are wiped at the end of them. And I think there's some point where you start to get diminishing results. When it's like overworking a piece of metal too much. So that's, for me, is like 1.5 is kind of as long as I want it to go. I'll take it to 1:45 if I think, I just want to put this piece in because it's too raw or ragged. But at that point, I will make things come to a close, and I'll be very transparent. This piece and this piece are not resolving. We're going to let them be. Mom is still in her suffering. We are not going to be getting to that tonight. That sort of thing. So that's what you can do at the conscious level. Put in the number of elements, the sizes and scale of the issue, et cetera, for the time that you have. The other one is more stance. And I had a teacher once put it, which is, how do you set the bandwidth? It's an internal stance. Are we doing this? Are we narrowing in? Are we really focused? Or are we opening up the whole field for wahoo? Put on your seatbelts. Yeah. This is going to be, a lot more is going to show up. This is less. Again, this is not a precise thing. This is all the art of the work. So that's one thing. You can manage that to a degree. You can also normalize for your groups, for yourselves, when you feel like, oh, we saw the parent shift a little bit, and I think that's what we're going to have tonight. That thing with your brother that we were hoping for, I just think we're tired, we're done. This comes under the orders of helping again, by the way, the extra one that I gave to Grace. So that's one thing. The other thing I want you all to get used to is that there are basically 3 kinds of endings. There is the tied up with a beautiful ribbon. Yay, it's so perfect. Everyone's happy. We got the resolution. I would say that's, I don't know, 30 or 40%. There is a pretty good, pretty good. It's got some bits that aren't together, and it's not, but it's, it's pretty good. And that's probably about 50%. And then 10%, what psychotherapists generally call resistance. The resistance in the system is just, it's powerful. And what it means, again, I want to keep reframing resistance. As long as there is resistance, it means something has not been included or seen yet. So we don't pathologize resistance, but you've been at it for an hour and a half and you haven't found it. You just haven't found the thing. And so you're just going to have to turn to your client and help them see what there is to actually appreciate. And they might have had the wherewithal to say, I'm just glad it's all out there. They might have the ability to have the glass half full, but some of them won't. They'll be disappointed. And you just, without making a pretty story out of it, don't do that. You want to be very transparent. Say, you know what? The system there's more here than we can get to tonight. And I just want to acknowledge the connection you made with your lost brother was very sweet. And I want you to notice that for just a moment. Even as I acknowledge that all this other stuff is still very, still in process, however you put it, yeah? And again, be in rapport with especially the client who's feeling disappointed or kind of wiped. This is why you want to be staying in relationship with the client all the way through. Yeah, does that help answer the question, Judith? You're muted.
There's just one more little part. I was interested when you said setting the bandwidth.
Yeah.
And
it's like the invitation to the field.
Right.
How much wackadoodle stuff is the group ready to have show up right now?
And I'm just trying to think, like, I've been working on getting what it is that I want to constellate to be as specific as possible.
Sure.
And so it might not even matter, but in some way I don't understand if there's some way that I could think I'm being specific and have the bandwidth towards 45 minutes, an hour, and I'm allowing somehow there's way more that's being invited in, or am I overthinking it?
It's because you and I are not in charge of the field, right?
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, it's basically that. I mean, the only complete system is the universe.
Okay.
Now, to fix someone's depression, we're not going to put in everything in the universe. That would be kind of silly.
Mm-hmm.
Or even everything on the planet, right? And that's we've already severely limited the system, but even that's way too big, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it means whatever subset system we have chosen, it's usefully artificial.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's always embedded in something larger.
Okay.
And this is a good thing because every once in a while, or constantly, shall I say, we'll be going through a constellation, we'll have set the terms of the system, and then the field will let us know, this other piece we didn't include is crucial. Like it turns out racism is crucial, or, the Chinese Civil War, or the dead brother that we forgot about in the interview. Yeah. And then we'll go, oh, now we have it. Now we got it. Right. You can feel the movement happening because finally we're including the key element. So we want it to be like that.
Right.
And it's a problem.
Okay.
At the same time.
Right. Yeah.
I remember, and then this is an example I use a lot because it was such a clean one. I was doing a constellation a few years ago, and we were right at, it was one of the Rudramandir nights. We were right at about an hour and 15 minutes. The tableau was up, the ancestors, the client. It was just gorgeous. Everyone was feeling good. And then one person in this crowd of about 10 went, excuse me. I went, yes. I'm always nervous at the end. What do you need to say right now? I'm noticing that I'm uncomfortable about that thing over there, whatever it was. And then another one raised their hand. I said, well, I'm also noticing this thing over there. And then like in about a minute, 6 people had their hands up. Wow. I'm like, no effing way, folks. No.
Mm-hmm.
This is not good for the client. I've got another constellation to do. We are done. This is good. And what I did was I said, I really want to acknowledge that for some reason that I don't know, a bunch of new doors just got opened in the field that are important and relevant, but we're not going to open them now. Could everyone who just noticed an open door with respect close it? And everyone went, okay. And that was it.
Wow.
And then we were able to bring the constellation to a close. Yeah. You got to be in rapport. You got to be in relationship. You can't just like shut stuff down. But there are times when the orders of helping will help us with this.
Right. Well, and it just feels like your very calm confidence, non wired up response allowed everybody else to feel the ending that was there. Right. And be like, okay, there's always more. And it's just very, it's really helpful for me to hear because it just calmed me. It's like, okay, just trust. You have to trust. I have to trust my place in the constellation, in the field, and just be sensitive to what's going on and when enough is enough. Don't push the river.
Yeah. And this is one of the things that, comes with leadership in group processes. There's no one else who gets to decide when we're done but us.
Okay.
So if we're not willing to do that, that's going to be a problem.
Okay.
Now, sometimes it's obvious. We're all happy. Yay. Right. But even then, I had such a good constellation the other night. It was beautiful. It was ending really beautifully. And the client started going, and then my father. And I'm like, no. Come back to this moment and what we're experiencing right here. I mean, she was already spinning off into the next incomplete thing.
Huh.
We do, you know, we notice what's not there, what's still missing, what's in it, you know, but I'm like, father for another time.
Okay.
Notice what's here right now.
Hmm.
You know?
Yeah, that
Which
feels
is
like part of
something
the.
that she's a particular kind of client who has a hard time doing that.
Hmm.
She keeps on, there are people who are constitutionally, you keep on noticing the next unfinished thing rather than fully receiving what's complete enough in the moment.
Right, right.
Which of course means that they're never satisfied because there's no such thing as finding all the things, right?
Yeah.
So helping them a little bit to feel good about good enough is actually part of your healing support for them. Okay, since we're already talking about this, let's dive into the orders of helping. So this is all really critical business for us, yeah. Who and I know at least one person said that they didn't get to it, and Anna is not here. I don't know which orders are not covered. It's not a big deal. But who had the first order? Kelly did. Okay. Okay.
May I just ask, oops, is there a page number in the book?
No, this is
Only
something
the article.
two or three times.
Yeah, no, I have
Online.
that.
That's it. No, this is
Okay.
not from Love's Hidden Symmetry.
Okay.
This is an article. This is something he wrote separately.
Okay.
And it's only that link.
Okay.
So if you want to pull up the link for yourself, feel free to do that. I don't have that immediately handy. So Kelly had the first order. Basically, the summary of the first order of helping is in many ways the most important. We only give what we have and only expect what we need. And this sounds so simple, right? Who here tries to give more than you have, right? And this is why the whole put your gas mask on first thing is so important, making sure you're resourced in the beginning. And I was reading a really great little article by my Sufi coach, Mark Silver, who used to be an EMT. And he said, what is your first priority in business? What would be most people's answers? Well, the clients, of course, right? He says, oh, no. When you're an EMT, your first priority is your safety. The second priority is the safety of your team. The patient doesn't come in until number 3. Yeah? Because if you're dying, your client is dying, right? Right? This is why we have fire evacuation. So firefighters don't have to go into places where, they're going to get injured, right? Okay, we only give what we have and only expect we need. The disorder, when we try to give what we don't have or when someone expects or demands what we can't give. This will also happen. This is off, and this comes up in the other orders of helping. This is when, unknown to them, they have transferred their parents onto you. That really deep, unfinished hunger that they have. And it's very understandable. All of us have done it at some point. We've had a guru, we've had the perfect teacher, we've all done it. Maybe it was a lover who was going to, fix all of life's problems. But as a facilitator, we need to decline the invitation, and we'll get into that. I think that's the third one. Okay. But just notice, and this helps. Some of us can get a little reactive when clients start asking for a lot more than, you're not giving me what I need, right? If we can understand it as the child's need for the parents, and then we bow to and honor the parents, then we can be less reactive and again, decline the seductions of being recruited into the parental role. This is something I'm trying to model all the time as a teacher. with y'all. Okay, who had the second? Judith, what's your summary, and happen to have an example by any chance? Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. The second order is knowing about why you're helping and the circumstances for it. And there is a way that we can offer help because the situation is intolerable to us or because of something we need. So my example is with the grown men who were once my little baby boys, and of wanting to help, wanting to do things for them, asking questions about, can I do this? Do you need this? And them being really getting very angry at me. And my not understanding, my thinking, I'm just trying to do something nice. And when I read these orders of love for the first time 9 months ago, I was like, oh my God, this is what I'm doing. I'm feeling lonely. I'm missing the connection of this hug and this person on my lap. And I keep trying to connect by asking questions or offering things. And it's not working. And that I actually was asking them to help me by doing that. Very different from if they need me to do something or they need to talk about something or my grandchildren need something and you provide it. So this was a distinction that is very, very powerful for me.
Awesome. And I do like the way he puts it. Circumstances need to be respected,
Mm-hmm.
and interventions only go as far as circumstances permit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was a serial over-helper.
But also notice that the feeling of when someone stands next to you and faces your circumstances with you, what a gift that is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And how little of that we ordinarily do in our culture. So when you can really stand with a client and face their circumstances with them, you're doing something quite remarkable and really empowering. And the disorder is when helping denies the reality of circumstances instead of facing them side by side with the client. Third, who has a third?
Me.
Hi, Serena.
Hello. So you kind of started talking about it, the parent-child transference. It's important to note that both sides can get caught in it, and it hinders the development of both. To remember that the helper is the guide to help the client back to their parents, and in that it's important to honor and respect the client's parents. And keeping those boundaries clear, especially for the helper, so they don't try to substitute for the parents that the client always wished they had, or do too much for their client. I suppose, and vice versa, the child or the client acting like a child and demanding too much from the helper. So just clear boundaries.
Any chance you have an example? That was just extra points. If you don't have one, that's fine.
I mean, I feel like I've taken on my ancestors for sure, but yeah, just like me not approving of the way my parents lived or did it with me. Being out of order.
And it's really important. The clients will come to us with that all the time. Yep. Our job is not to make the client respect their parents. Our job is for us to, as the facilitator. And then as we do that, and as we decline the invitation to function as the parent, it's like we give them a ramp. We give them a scaffold to try on little bits. Yeah. And I love what he says here about we need to treat grown-up clients as adults. Like, you know, yeah. Fourth, that might have been, oh no, that was Dinka, great.
The fourth order is to see the client not as individual, but as part of system, and that we always include, like, we can have the full picture of the client as he is only if we see them as part of the system. Only then we can actually understand who the client needs from the system, and who he has in depth with, like who we need to work with. And yes, then we as the helper, we have sympathy not to the individual, but we have the sympathy to the system he has been put into. And yeah, seeing the excluded ones, also seeing the ones that hold the key to what the client needs is very important.
Yeah. And do you have an example, perhaps? Again, if you don't, that's fine.
Well, I just, what came to me was in my constellation when I had to see the potential partner, that only when you Leslie said, let these chairs represent the family of the potential partner, then I really felt like trust to approach him. Actually, that was my
awesome. Great, thank you. I also like what Hellinger says here about the disorder is when people essential to the system are overlooked out of a desire to spare the client. Yeah. So, you know, he hates his dad, so we won't make him have to deal with his dad. Yeah. Now, in the short term, I think it's okay to make strategic decisions about who you include and who you look at. But we don't want to join in the client's conscious or unconscious desire to exclude people that they disapprove of in the family system. And I love this phrase as well. The risk here is that the helper's sympathy with the system is seen by harsh by the client. So this is, it has to be done very deftly. Yeah. This is where you have to respect your parents thing. It can go very wrong, right? Or you find some way to appreciate the abusive parent and they turn to you and they feel really misunderstood by you because you're appreciating the abusive parent. So you have to, again, the pace, lead, the rapport stuff here is very, very important. And Bert Hellinger tends to be rather intense about these things and rather straightforward. We don't have his weight, so we have to be a little bit more careful. But it is still important not to mistakenly exclude elements simply out of sympathy for the client's discomfort. Yeah. And I love this other thing. Clients who are seeking solutions as adults see the systemic method as liberating. Yeah. So, oh, it's a relief to see my mother, my abusive mother, as in a line of abused women. And now I see her differently. It feels good. Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things I always loved in constellations where you have this kind of a relationship is when they say, you know, this is your source of life. If
Right.
nothing else, you've come from this person. They're the reason why you have a life. And that just seems to have a power that's much more maybe objective and less triggering. And I always felt that difference, which was like, oh yeah, okay, this is like,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That again is the in that order. That's the gift of the systemic, rather than the personal. Just the relationship between your mother, which is very fraught and difficult and painful, right? Oh, I'm part of a whole thing, and she's part of it, and I'm part of it, and I have my life through that. Okay, it changes. It softens it somehow. Yeah, yeah, excellent. Fifth order of helping. I'm going to assume this is Anna's. Family constellations join what has been separated. They support reconciliation, especially with parents. And the disorder is judging others and taking on a superior moral stance. So this is another really tricky bit, right? Because constellations gives us the opportunity to withhold judgment, to have a more dispassionate view of complex events. At the same time, the shadow can be moving into, well, it didn't matter that the abuse happened, right? Right. So we've got to stay in sympathy with the, you know, sort of common human morality and consequences, even as we're almost always, and there are exceptions, but we're almost always looking for the movement towards belonging and reconciliation. Having said that, there are times when withdrawal and separation are important movements as well. Again, Grace had a great teaching night the other night. Holy crap, what a night. It was one for the books, my friends. And I'll talk about it a little bit later, but we actually had a bit of a separation from the mother in order to have a deeper connection with the father. This is this sort of thing, and it doesn't mean we're separating you from your mother, but he was too merged with his mother. He was pretty spouseified, and so he, just for now, better place to be with the father. Yeah. So there can be separations and distancings and even full-on withdrawals, but they're all ultimately in a service of reconciliation. Yeah. And then Grace, Leslie's sixth order of helping.
Yes. I'll just, essentially what it is that we only help as much as the client and the system can integrate. And we only see what's available to be seen, more or less. And I have two examples of opposite sides of that. One was from last night, and Leslie already referenced it. This sort of, we got to a really nice, sweet place, and then the client was like, but that wasn't all of it. You know, there was this other thing. But it was enough. And it was, anyway, this whole other thing. The opposite side of it, my own constellation a few months ago, which Judith and Kelly were part of or were witness to, Leslie was saying some things to me on the side that didn't appear to be immediately relevant to my outcome, my requested outcome, but ended up being so enriching and so important to me afterwards. So that was the opposite example of where, as the client, I actually was ready for and able to integrate more than I had originally asked for. And so more came in. Yeah. So I guess on the one hand, there's one client who was asking for more, but was already actually saturated, hadn't even taken in what was fully there. And then there was another one where more came in than was asked for, but there was room for it. So there was a really good kind of measuring that happened for Leslie.
Yeah. Thank you. And if I sort of do my own check-in, like what's the difference between those two? If I'm tired, the group's probably tired and the field's probably tired. You know, if we're more than, if we haven't, you know, if we've done it for a while, right? If I'm having that feeling at 5 minutes in, that might not be what's going on. But I just had the sense of, I'm feeling done with this. I think we're done with this. And then the other example is a feeling of abundance, of something more there to share or communicate. Yeah, excellent. And I just added that in. I think it's implicit in some of the other orders, but I really wanted to operationalize this, the endless constellation. There's another thing and another thing and another thing and another thing and another thing. Woo.
You know, what's kind of funny about that, maybe you'll talk about the funny experience that was, that first constellation.
Yeah.
But that person happens to be a friend of mine. And so she spent the night at my house afterwards. So I got to talk with her, and it was a learning experience for me to hear what she was integrating. She's one of a very large family. And that was coming up a lot in the constellation, like what it is to be a child of a very large family. And at the very end where she was like, but wait, one more thing, which she does all the time. And she always talks about, I want my full turn. I never get my full turn. Like I never get enough. But when I talked to her
she's
afterwards,
one of 11 kids.
and she was saying, I don't know why Leslie kept focusing on it being a big family. I mean, what's the big deal about that? So we were able to talk a little bit about, wow, you know, did you ever feel when you were one of 11 kids in this family that you never got your whole turn? She's like, defines my life. Like, so yeah, it was just really interesting for me to watch how extreme that constellation was. And yet it didn't really, it'll take some time for it to land, I guess.
I'll just share for folks. It really was one for the books, and I feel like I need to write it up. I have a normal room that I'm in that, you know, if we really cram them in, we can maybe fit in 40 in a egg-shaped circle, maybe. I mean, that's really crammed. We were in a different room, a smaller room. And we were full. We had probably 27 or 8 when 6:30 hit, which is my start time, right? Over the course of the next hour, 15 more people came in. We topped out at 40 people. I mean, the fire marshal probably would have cited us. And I was getting really cranky because all these people kept coming in. By the way, Grace, later on, I realized I'd put up a sign on the door that said, "Constellation's here, welcome, come on in."
But it was,
Which
I mean,
what people were doing. They kept on just opening the door and coming on in.
In a wheelchair, so in the middle of the constellation, 3 people had to get up and move their chairs so the wheelchair could fit. And then we got to a part of the constellation where somebody in the constellation said, there's too many people. And then 3 more people came in right at that moment.
And what it was is it was the constellation in action for this family of every generation it had a dozen kids. So we were dealing with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. And at a certain point we were just laughing. It was hysterical. It was the funniest thing. But I was getting like, people were showing up very nonchalantly an hour late. I'm like, at least be apologetic about it or something. People were just like, I'm here now.
And there was one part where Leslie tried to set a boundary. You were kind of like, you know, it's an hour late and this is a group process. And then the client talks over her, my friend, talks over and goes, come on in. Like, you don't get to do that.
I went, the field is in charge. It was a wacky night. It was really crazy. That was one for the books.
Can I ask a question, actually?
Yeah.
About that? And I don't mean this in a critical way. It's actually a curiosity way about talking about things after constellations. So when Grace was like talking to her about it, and she was like, I don't know why Leslie kept bringing family in. I mean, you actually nailed the insight of, well, did you ever feel like exclude, or like there wasn't enough in your family? Are those the kinds of things that like the field is supposed to be giving the client because they can't hear it? Like when somebody just tells them, like is there, that's kind of, I'm always looking for guidelines about how to talk to clients after these things.
Yeah.
It's not a criticism, Grace, because
No.
No, I love it. That's a really good point.
Yeah. When I heard what Grace said, I went, oh, they went home and talked about it. And then I thought, but it's Grace.
Yeah.
Grace is going to be thinking about it systemically. So and I also thought, well, they're also, once they leave the door, they're out of your hands.
Right.
They're out of your hands. If they're going to, you can only control things so much. It's a personal thing, Kelly. It's a bit of a stylistic thing. The truth is that Leslie is an extremely verbal person.
Mm-hmm.
And if I err on any side, I probably talk too much.
Mm-hmm.
I'm aware of that, and I try to keep the reins on it
Mm-hmm.
as much as I can, because we all know that there's such a thing as over talking things, over analyzing. I'll give you a good example from a non-constellations experience the other day. Because there are times when you could say the right thing, but it still isn't going to land anyway, so there isn't much point. Grace saying that in a more, in a certain way, we had said the same thing Grace just said 100 times in that constellation, but until they were relaxing afterwards and her good friend said it, she didn't hear it. Right? And maybe slightly different wording. Yeah. The other night, I was at an acting class, and one guy was saying, I'm changing my monologue, I don't want it. And he was going on, and I wanted to challenge him on it, because I thought he was avoiding something, but I thought, I'm just a fellow student, I'm not going to say anything. He's not going to hear it. He's changed his mind. He's going to change his monologue. And then he went to the teacher, and in about 2 minutes, she talked him out of it. It was something he had to hear from her, and I knew he wasn't going to hear it from me. So, this is why this work is heartbreaking, right? It's an art. You're going to say things people don't hear. Later on, you'll think of something and you go, shit, I should have said that. You do as much as you kind of can in the moment. You do want to be tracking when you're trying to get them to hear something that for whatever reason they're not hearing, and it's time to just let it be. And that's when you really do want to trust the field, that something's moving in them, that there's an integration process, and what's going to land for them is going to land for them, and just let them be with it a bit.
What happened with Grace was actually an example of trust the process, right?
Exactly.
She had this huge visual and like physical experience, and then kind of like was able to, like, in the quieter afterwards, like, yeah,
exactly. And then Grace embodied and spoke the insight in a way she heard. And not to be specific to that client, just generally, we've all got 1 or 2 or 3 patterns that are our friggin' go-tos. And we just grind them out. And we find, if we fix them in our intimate relationships, we'll then have them at work. And then we'll fix them at work, and then we'll have them in another context, right? And there's often some aspect to these patterns that we're going to take to our graves. Yeah. There's a certain kind of just like, you know, that thing I have with, well, just to use this as an example, because it's easy and it's available. The thing I have with feeling like I never get my turn, that might be my life thing. But we get into better relationship with the pattern. We're not as reactive to it. We're not as resistant to it. We can get a little fond of it. We go, oh, there's me doing my thing again. Or we can get surprised. Oh shit, I just really got triggered again around that thing in a new context. You know, with the sales guy at Best Buy who wasn't paying attention to me. You know, this is what's the second, this is part of the second order of helping. Circumstances need to be respected, not only in the moment in terms of your interventions with clients, but in a larger sense, the big one or two or three are part of our whole life journey. They just are. Yeah. And instead of fixing them or resolving them or making them go away, what we're really doing is developing a different relationship with them, which of course changes how they show up. Yeah. In very deep ways. Yeah. And when you see that in your client, there's a certain amount of just bowing to that. Okay, this is, I did my little bit. Hopefully it gives them some relief. But this is part of their life journey. Yeah. So we keep circling back. I have a funny feeling now that we have the orders of helping as a reference, it's the same thing with primary and secondary emotions. Once we have that as a reference, it becomes kind of a go-to. These become really, I mean, this becomes something you can really lean on. Yeah. So what I want to do right now is I want to shift into an exercise that's going to embody some of this stuff. But before I do that, any questions or comments that are important about the orders of helping? Or even just appreciations, like, whoa, I'm so glad we have that piece now, whatever. Yeah, sorry, Dinka.
Yes, I have this question of the expectations that you set up before, maybe, in order, because when we say, like, when the clients sometimes are unhappy,
Yeah.
is there any way for us to set up expectations in
Yeah.
ahead of what
Yeah.
is possible?
Yeah. So you can do a lot of conscious expectation setting, and then there's all the unconscious expectation stuff, right? Which we can have a modest effect on. There really is a small subset of people. My apologies. They're usually people with borderline patterning, who, and if you don't know what that is, you can look it up. We're all a little borderline, all of us. So don't get too triggered by that word, but who, due to abandonment and rejection and loss in childhood, experience everything is not enough. And these are the people that, again, psychotherapists tend to call resistant patients, and they don't like working with them by and large, because they don't tend to have much insight into how they're creating the experience of dissatisfaction for themselves. And you work with them and you see something really wonderful happen, and they cannot take it in. They just can't. They won't, and they're going to blame you for it or something, some circumstances. They may be more self-blaming, they may be more other blaming, whatever it is. But so there is a subset of clients who that's just kind of how they roll. And that's not easy. It's not easy to facilitate for them, because I know when I'm done and I've done my best and I've brought my best, and something still isn't included, and their heart is aching, and you're like, yeah, it's difficult. There's not a lot you can do to fix. So that I'm just making a distinction. But yes, there are some conscious things that you can do. Number one is if someone comes right out and says, "What can I expect?" I mean, I love that question from a potential client. What results can I expect? I love that because it just clears it all up. You know, if I'm going to take my car to the mechanic, I expect my car to be fixed. That's not what Constellations is like, right? Or any healing modality. And so it's an opportunity to remind clients what they already know. Yeah. Like even if they go to a therapist, they're not expecting their, you know, to get, they understand, but sometimes they need to be reminded a little bit. So what I tend to do is say, listen, there's a wide range of possibilities. I've seen miracle cures, and I give a couple of examples of those. I've seen people who they don't see much outwardly change, but they're still glad they did it. Some of them get an outcome that they like, but it's not what they expected. And I have a bunch of examples of these. I give examples. And I say this is a non-linear healing process, so I can't tell you exactly what to expect. And they all nod their heads and they go, "Oh yeah, of course," right? Because I'm not insulting their intelligence right now. And then I say, pretty much everybody is really glad they did it, and whether they can see the results on the outside or not, they feel something inside that makes them glad that they had this experience. Yeah. So that's just a frame. Now, I don't say that to every potential client, but if someone comes right out and says, "What am I going to get out of this?" That's the kind of thing I tend to say. And I love when they ask that question. I just love it. I know people who like get really offended by this question, and I'm like, wait a second, they're paying you money. This is a perfectly legitimate question, right? So that's one thing. The other thing then, of course, when it comes to time to clarify what you're working on, is to make sure it's crisp, right? So if it's, well, let me give the made-up example from earlier in the call. I'm going to a wedding next week. My cousin is going to be there. We haven't talked in 5 years. We had a fight at the last wedding. I would like things to go better this time. You can be pretty sure you're going to help them out with that a bit. I mean, you're going to include something. They're going to see something that's going to relax them and make it more likely that they're not going to get as triggered. Yeah. Just at some level, and it may be miraculous. You know, you may do something and then they come back later and say, "The cousin, she put her arms around me and said, 'I've missed you so much. You know, why did we fight?'" You know, and you're like, "Oh, yay, score for one for the miracle cure." If someone says, "I have lifelong depression," then you're going to be honest and say, "You know what? I'm not going to pretend to heal that in an hour and a half constellation. That would be disrespectful to you and your experience. Let's see if we can do a chunk to give you some relief." Yeah. And then if it's me, I might say, and we might want to think about working together for a few months. Then we could do a few different chunks on this. Yeah. Yeah. But let's see if we can find a workable chunk. What part is most important about the depression? Oh, I would just like to be able to get out of bed more easily in the morning. Great. Excellent. Chunk it down a little bit. That also helps focus the constellation. The more you focus the goal, the outcome, the more likely you are to be successful, the more you're going to avoid unrealistic expectations, the more you're going to remember to cycle back to the outcome in the constellation. Like you may be with the dead of World War II, right? And then you remember, oh, the client wants to clean out their cluttered closets. Okay. So we have all the dead of World War II there, and you can have a final sentence around the dead looking at the client and saying, "You have our blessing to have a more ordered life than we could have. It would be okay with us." Okay, so you're bringing it back to the issue that the client, right? Even though we've gone like this, and the client's sitting there going, well, this is all very awesome, but what about my closets? Or they've forgotten about their closets, maybe, because they're sobbing about the dead of World War II, right? But we want to, you know, and then they can go home and look at their closets and honor their ancestors and maybe start cleaning out a few things, right? Yeah. So a few different angles on that. And they're just going to be people. There are people who they're that when I was talking about that thing you kind of might take to the grave, there's a very tragic set of people for whom the meaning is nothing works. Nothing works for me. I don't get enough. It doesn't work for me. It's a heartbreaker. And all you can do is keep showing up as a professional, keep looking for what has not been included, and then hope that this pattern continues to soften for them over their life. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. There is a little bit of self-work you have to do at the end, and this is something you can only do by practice. But how do you stay in rapport with yourself when you have one of those less than perfect resolutions? And you'll find your way with that. You know, do I get apologetic? Do I feel guilty? I mean, I still do. I feel guilty. What did I miss? What did I not include? Yeah, I do. You know, with respect. And I also ask those questions myself in a more legitimate way, in a more self-accountability way. Like, was there something I missed? Could have been, yeah. I have been known, by the way, about once a year I reach out to a client who I know ended very unhappily, and I can see that there's something I might have done better or different. I'll write and I'll say something like, how are you doing? First, I'll check how they're doing, because if they're really happy with it, who am I to define them to not have been happy? But if they're saying, yeah, I wasn't super happy with that ending, I say, you know, I think I missed a thing or two. But I think there were some genuinely good things, and I'd point those out. And then I would say, why don't we let this integrate for a few months? Why don't you come back in like 3 months, and I'll do a constellation at half price for you. And we'll see if we can't pick up the pieces we weren't able to pick up the other night.
Mm-hmm.
9 times out of 10, clients are delighted because they feel really seen and acknowledged. And I've done a little like, oh, I think I missed something. But I still have the belief, like, you know, if we let it sit for a little bit and rest and integrate, I'll come at it a bit fresh and we'll have a better chance of including the piece we might have missed. I prefer that than just, you know, never seeing them again. Because then we have a chance to kind of like find the piece. Yeah. I don't do it very often, but every once in a while my ethics and my conscience leads me to do that. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so I want you all, this is okay. So I meant to say something about this in the beginning, but I forgot. So you're all going to need about a dozen things. They can be little stones, they can be spoons, they can be pieces of paper, coffee cups. Go off and get a dozen somethings.
Are we going to need a tabletop surface?
No, you're going to need a little bit of floor. Thimbles, earplugs, earrings.
Are rocks like this too big?
No, but you just need a dozen, that's all. rolled up socks. Yeah, socks are great. Socks would work just fine. Jewelry, spare bracelets. And you are going to need a little space because once we get going, you are going to stand. You can wait until everybody gets back, but you're going to need a little space. You're going to be doing solo constellations, just a constellation for you. And I'm going to guide you all through it at the same time. Y'all don't sweat this too much. Just grab stuff. Don't feel like you got to get the perfect stuff. And you don't even need to be doing this in front of the webcam, because I'm not going to be tracking you. You're going to be doing your own process. But for now, come back to the webcam if you're ready, just so I know you're here. Please don't sweat this too much. Okay, Kelly?
I'm here.
Excellent. Okay, so this is an exercise, and it's not a tabletop. You're going to be standing. You need a space. You're going to be putting stuff on the floor. Okay, so find a little space on the floor and get up and stand in it. This is a format that I got from Bill Mannell. He's in Connecticut. And this is a format for, well, sort of for the orders of helping in a way. So first thing I want you to do is you're going to represent yourself through the whole thing, okay? And take one of the objects and place it in front of you, and this is going to represent a client, and not a specific person, not anyone with a name, just a client, a generic client. So place that in front of you as a way to mark. And the thing to remember when you're doing these kinds of constellations is, instead of looking at the floor at the object, which we're wont to do, imagine a person is standing there. And look at your client in the eyes. And your client is looking at you. Just like, imagine we just grab some people off the street and we've got representatives, okay? So just look straight ahead at your client. And just notice how this feels. This is an encounter or a meeting, an interaction with a client. Now, this may feel awesome. It may feel scary. You may want to run away. Don't move. Stay where you are. You may feel smaller than your client. You may feel bigger than your client. You may get sad. You may, whatever. Just notice what you notice, okay? And put something down for you. So put something down at your own feet, just as a marker, because you're going to be moving around a bit. So now you notice what it's like to represent yourself in your facilitator client system. So step out of you and step into the client in the system. Facing, so you want to be facing you. Face the facilitator you. And just notice what the system feels like from the client's point of view. Again, without judgment, just curiosity. Notice what it's like. Do you feel great? Do you feel confused? Do you feel big, small, sad, happy? Just notice. Okay, so bookmark what that's like. You can step off of that, and now you know what this relationship feels like from both sides. Take another object. And this is going to represent your ancestors, and place that behind you and step into you, not the ancestors, step into you. And notice what it feels like to be in this system with your client, but now there's a change, which is that you have your clients, you have your ancestors behind you. So the system is you facing your client with your ancestors behind you. And just notice what's changed, if anything. And now I'm going to give you a few minutes to do this. You're going to take 4 or 5 more objects. And what you're going to do is imagine that behind you, there's kind of a U shape of elements, including the ancestors. But there are other things that support you. And I want you to get really imaginative about this. Could be your best friend, could be your spouse, but it could be your teaching lineage. It could be your kitty cat. It could be your garden. It could be your hobbies. Okay? So take 4 or 5 more items and just, pick one up and go, oh, this is my garden. And place it behind your spot. And then pick up another one and go, oh, this is my husband. And put that also behind you, until you build kind of a U of support behind you. About 4 or 5 of those. And do a couple that are a little whimsical, that aren't too like heavy duty, and have a certain sweetness to it. And when you've got those 4 or 5 or 6 things behind you, step into your spot facing your client. And notice what, if anything, has changed in this relationship when you bring into it your support. What's different, if anything? What changes from this position? And when you have a sense of that, you can step off of that and into the client and see what it feels like from the client's point of view when their facilitator has brought with them their support. That is, you with your support. How does it feel to the client? And bookmark that. And then you have some more objects left. And what I would like you to do now is to arrange them behind the client spot. One should be their ancestors, and the others just can be just other things, their friends, their hobbies, the things they care about, the land they love. Don't be too specific because this is not a specific person. Keep it a little generic, but just put the rest of the objects as one should be their ancestors and just the others, just give the other objects to in a similar U behind the client. And when you're done with that, step into your spot again, the facilitator spot, and notice what it's like now that both you as the facilitator and the client are supported. What, if anything, has shifted? And then out of curiosity, step into the client role, see how that feels from the client's point of view. And then back to yourself, because we want to end with you on your spot. And just stay on this spot as I say a few words, which is that we go through life with the illusion that we're all solo. And when we come into an interaction with a client with the meaning of I am on my own and the client is on their own, I got a big job to do. But this is an illusion. We're always got our support and they've always got theirs. The difference being we carry ourselves differently when we start to presuppose and carry this meaning with us rather than the other one. It makes the interaction different. And in some ways you can carry this unconsciously, and in other ways you can do this with some intention before you start talking to a client. Just vision this. Notice this. So in any way it feels useful to you, just notice this, what this is like, what this feels like, and bookmark it. In NLP, we call this a reference K, a reference feeling. Just bookmark it. Where do you feel it in your body? How do you breathe? How's your connection to the ground? How's your spine? Just notice how it feels in your body and as an emotional state and as an intellectual one. When you have this encounter, even in your study groups, from the place of how much you're supported and how much the other person is supported, and in some sense, how small and temporary your job is. And from this place, you can turn to the client and to their whole system and say, if I can be of use, it would be my honor.
If I can be of use, it would be my honor.
If I can do it, at least it would be my honor.
And then marinate in this a bit if you want to, but when it feels, don't overdo it either. When it feels done enough, just pick up the objects and put them aside and come on back to the webcam. Is that the coolest exercise or what? I learned that from Bill Mantle in 2011 down at the airport hotel down in Burlingame. And I've never forgotten it. I use it all the time with folks like you guys. And I do it for myself in not quite so thorough form. I'd like a couple of shares about what you noticed, what was different, what seemed to have an impact, or what you noticed about that experience.
I was surprised to notice, I learned something about the kind of support that feels helpful.
Which
Like
one?
I realized that with my supports like friends and these shaman I'm always running into and other coaches, you know, people like that, I tend to talk about in a learning way. And I realized that wasn't actually what I wanted. When I had them behind me, I realized I didn't want to be talking about what was going on. I just wanted to feel their presence and strength.
Awesome. And you noticed a shift in how it felt with the client?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in appreciable ways. When I only had my ancestors behind me, well, when I was first just me, I was aware of the client in the usual kind of intuitive, empathetic, you're like, oh, I'm kind of feeling what that, I think that person's feeling thing. Then my ancestors came in and I became aware of like, oh, I'm sensing from a much bigger field. I mean, I have a lot more awareness now coming. And then when all my supports came in, it kind of shrank until I felt a little bit like I could have wandered off and it still would have been fine. You know, like I was. So I went from like, oh, I have this huge picture to like, I'm pretty irrelevant in this whole thing.
And we're somewhere between the two ends of the spectrum, right?
Yeah.
Somewhere between God and nothing. We're somewhere in there.
Somewhere in that range. Yeah.
Right. Did anyone have a, like, when you first stood across from the client, it felt negative in some way? And then the support ended up improving that feeling? Yeah, Kelly?
Yeah, I was actually kind of shocked and disappointed at how nervous and anxious I felt in both roles. Like I was like, okay, I get why I'd be nervous and anxious, like as a facilitator, but like what's going on with the client or what's going on with facing me as a facilitator that the client is so nervous. But I think on a bigger scale, it's probably just clients are just I mean, I'm always nervous when I'm a client too. So, but it definitely shifted as we brought those elements in, and it even to the point where, and I really like just feel like that, just stay in that feeling of having the support and facing the client with support. I kind of actually almost felt like there was a physical, like, soft, like warm chair that I was kind of like, that was kind of like cradling me a little bit over the shoulder. Like it felt pretty powerful too.
Awesome. And the meaning I make out of that is that nervousness and anxiety you are feeling, the meaning of that is I've got to do this all by myself.
Yeah.
And then the discovery, I don't need to do this all by myself. And by the way, the client doesn't either.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Judith.
I had the experience of, as things got added in both positions, I felt my feet, I was much more grounded.
Yeah.
And the scope of my vision changed. I think I had a feeling of readiness starting out as the facilitator. And when I stepped into the client, I thought, oh God, I hope she can help me, which I found pretty amusing. And the client, once the client had her, not only her ancestors, but her resources, she was like, I can't wait to explore.
Yeah.
And I found as myself as facilitator, my vision of the client went from vertical up and down to very, very wide, just became very a horizontal perspective. And I felt so much more confident and so much more grounded. A lot, again, like what Kelly, of that feeling of I have to do it myself. I wasn't conscious of feeling that, but then feeling so supported and seeing that way was the opposite of that. So I must have been feeling it.
Yeah. Yeah, Dinka.
I when the client had their well, and I was looking to the point, and I was like, oh my God, what if my supporters and their supporters get like some like decide not to help each other, or like decide not to, I don't know.
Was that, I mean, is that what, was that just a thought, or was that what you were experiencing in the representations?
My role, like, wow, I think that there might be more complications now that we have more people.
So I want to reframe that. I think that's an excellent observation. And I think the reframe is, isn't it good that I'm noticing this now? Because the potential for entanglements with your clients are constant. Sorry, guys. Right? You know, the minute you, like, the example I've used a lot is when I get cranky, that's almost always I've gotten pulled into the system somehow. And that's probably because something is being mirrored in my system. I don't know what it is. I don't have time to figure it out, but I do have time to say, oh, okay, that's going on. Carry on. But you could just stand there and go, oh, this is really supportive. It's really awesome. And I might need to keep an eye on this. Right? You know, if my dead grandfather died the same way his dead grandfather died, yeah, it's a big part of where our blind spots. I mean, when the client system mirrors our own. So yay, Dinka. And all I invite you to do is reframe it as, oh, isn't it good? I can see this now. Rather than pretend it's just me and this person and there's nothing else involved. Right? Yeah, excellent. Serena, how was it for you?
It was noticeable support and just readiness and groundedness feeling once I got the supports in. Before that, I mostly got kind of this heart palpitation, like this kind of like almost up in my throat as the client, kind of like almost nervousness. And then I was like, no, that's not fear, that's excitement. That's what I told myself. And then I think I kind of it was like this, like, wow, I do want to help. I just really wonder how I'm going to really want to help. Like the way, like, I wonder what my way is going to be that I'm going to help. It was kind of like this, like, I wonder how I'm going to do this because this feels really good. And I do feel like this is all right. And I do feel supported. And this client, I can help this client. It's just like, I wonder what's going to be the result. Like, I wonder what is going to be the answer after all of this sifting. And
so I invite you to turn to your support. And by the way, one category I forgot, I don't know if some of you included it, but spiritual, God, angels, or things like the earth. Those are things you can, if you believe in those things, whatever those things are for you, you can include those things as well. To turn to those resources and say, I'm still figuring this out. Will you help me figure out what my way is?
mm-hmm.
And then see how it shows up. This is something I'm learning. This is something I'm getting from Dan Booth Cohen, is that one of the things that Constellations teaches us is to ask our ancestors for stuff. They are waiting to be asked. We don't. We're too polite with them, or it just doesn't occur to us. You know? I'm doing this amazing new thing called facilitating. It all feels wonderful, but I don't know how it's going to happen. I would like some help. And then see what happens.
Yeah, I like the idea of spending more time with the supports.
What I will often do, if I get a really good resource in a one-on-one constellation with someone, like a grandmother or the spirit of Russia or something like that, I have a little bowl of stones that I invite them to take one and anchor the sense in the stone. And then I say, you can use that as a worry stone or underneath your pillow or put it on an altar, so that they can kind of do something intentional with it for a little bit. So you can do that kind of thing. You can do the card, right on the card, my support, put it in your pocket, then you can forget about it. See what happens? Certainly before, maybe at the beginning of every study group, you just all agree, let's all just for a moment remember our support and the support of everyone in the group. And then before you actually facilitate, and before you say, if I were to facilitate for Dinka, before I say to her, what would you like? I might just say, Dinka, I'm just going to take a second and remember my support and your support. Do that. And then go, so Dinka, what would you like in this constellation, right? So we're starting from the right place. You can do these things kind of on manual in the beginning until some of it becomes kind of muscle memory-ish. Yeah. So you can borrow from family traditions, cultural ways that your people have, or in ways that you're inspired by other people's, as long as it's not too culturally appropriate-ish, you know how it is. But yeah. Oh, you're going along and your friend says, I do this thing to remember that thing. And you go, oh, that's a good idea. That's a good one. I'm going to do that. Yeah. A couple of things I also just want to say about the first experience for people. Most people, when they just do this exercise the first time and they're being themselves and the client, feel horrible. So I just really want to normalize that for all of you who felt horrible. It's kind of supposed to. It's supposed to reveal how difficult it is to learn how to do anything like this if we don't have our supports and we're not noticing that the other person has their supports. I've got to do it myself, yeah, and that's going to resonate for the client. If we are running the meaning, I can't do this, clients are not going to be so rude as to show up and ask for your help, right? Oh, she doesn't think she can do it. I won't make her do it. And then you'll wonder why you have no clients, right? That's systemic, right? That's systemic. So the other thing that I just want to say about this is a general Constellation thing that I've said before, but I'm going to keep saying, because we're going to keep falling into the mistake of literalizing stuff. When you stepped into the client, it wasn't external reality. It's your internal meaning about clients, because it's your system. So if you even stepped into a client who was like angry at you and pissed at you, I remember I used to do this, because I used to do this business stuff a lot with people, you and your business constellations, which I've done with some of you in the Zoom, the business integration. And I remember one time, it actually went on for several months. It was really, really debilitating. But every time I stepped into my business said, you freak me out, you scare me, and I'm running away. Which didn't do much to heighten my confidence. to step into my business feeling that terrified of me and offended by me and freaked out. And I had to keep reminding myself, this is not I have not divined what's going on in my business. My business isn't a person. It's a thing. It's some meaning going on in me about my business that this constellation is bringing to light. And if I can avoid being reactive to it, what's really important about this information? And mostly what I noticed is that our businesses mirror other things in our lives. And I was doing a lot of fear. I was doing tons of fear in my life at that time. Please try not to take these things too personally or literally, and be curious about, even if things arise that don't feel good or whatever, don't try and explain away the feeling to make yourself feel better. Take the information seriously and see what it helps you see about the system and the meanings going on inside of you. Yeah? That will be more useful to you. Yes, Grace.
I've heard you. This is one of my big questions. So this makes sense to me when we're stepping into representing a thing that's not a person. There's two other circumstances I've heard you say this bit about. This isn't factual, this is a meaning in your system. One is, like, for example, you did it with the other client the other night where you said, your father didn't really blah, blah, blah with your great-great. That's the meaning in your system. And the other time I've seen you do it is, so one is like, is it factual or not? Oh shoot, there was another time I've seen you do it, I'm forgetting. Anyway, I've seen you do it a couple times. So when are we actually stepping into a non-local field of consciousness and tapping something?
It is always the meaning in the client system. Always, 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 always. Now your client system has a lot of objective information about the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? So you are getting a lot of when the representative does a gesture just like mom did,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of objective information in the client system, but it's still through the client's system. We kind of have to stick with this. This is actually a really important principle, because we can end up feeling like chess masters. We're manipulating the objects in the world, and the mother out there, and the father out there, and we're just moving them around. Yeah?
So
instead, what we're working with is the meaning of mother in the client, the meaning of father in the client. And there is some overlap with something out, and when we talk about the meaning in the client system, we're not talking about just their conscious system. It's the ancestral soul is big, but it's with the client at the locus. It's kind of the best. It's what I've noticed over and over and over again.
Yeah. So even like sometimes in constellations, something will come up about a great great grandfather that somebody's never met or like don't even know their name, whatever, but we know there's a great grandfather out there.
Yeah, it's not the conscious system.
So it's this, it's like the subconscious of the client, even though they've never met that person or heard any stories about that person, they still have a
Not
meaning.
the conscious. I mean, that's why, you know, if I have a behavior that's entangled with someone I've never heard of, it's all happening unconsciously, right? In fact, most of our bread and butter is in the space of things the client is not aware of, at least
Yeah.
not in the sense of having made a direct connection. You know, I've tried not to be like my mother. Yeah, I know. Funny how that works, you know?
Yeah.
Or, you know, that uncle, I didn't really know him that well, and I've never really thought about him. Yeah, well, you know, I mean, people will say that sort of thing all the time. Yeah. So it's still in the meaning of the client system.
Thanks.
And there are times we have to be kind of strict about that, because the way, and I think it came up in that moment, I don't remember specifically when I was warning against, this is not an objective information about the father, it's about the meaning in the client system right now, is that it can get to feel like we're like going in and manipulating and moving the pieces of the family around in a way that's sort of, I don't know, like a video game or something. There's something not quite nice about it. But if we're working inside the client's meanings, then we can have at it. I mean, within constraints, but that's a proper place for us to be working in.
That makes sense to me. It just is wild because I think also, at least speaking from my own constellation, and I hear it happens to others too, other people who weren't in the room shifted. So we were only working.
Still part of your system.
So you're saying my experience of other people shifted, or are you saying, I mean, because it's all like self and other, where does it fall apart, you know?
Exactly. I mean, we're all a neural network.
Right.
What is the self? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But if we change a meaning of mother inside of you right now, we do a constellation, and we change the meaning of mother right now, whatever constitutes non-local consciousness, and I don't know what it is, might be string theory, I don't know, but it goes through the ether to your real living mother, and it affects her. Just like if now you have a bad thought about somebody, my friends, it affects them. Pretty low level, probably affects your soul more than theirs. Yeah. One of the things my teachers said is we need to get over the illusion that the way we think about people in the world doesn't affect them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We could all think we have the private, you know, opinion about so-and-so, but every time we meet them, yeah. So if we change Dinka's relationship with her father in a constellation right now, whether he's dead or alive, it will go off and have a non-linear impact on him. Yeah. But we didn't go over and screw around with him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he still retains freedom to decline the influence.
Yeah.
At some level, right? This is why when people do constellations, understandably wanting their parents to be different, this can happen. I never promise it, right? Because as one teacher put it, you know, adults have the dignity of being able to decline the invitation, so to speak. Right? Just like you can decline the invitation of someone who's decided to feel better about you. No, I insist, you still think I'm terrible. And you'll win. You know? Right?
Well, I think it's part of how, when we really fully release and forgive somebody that we aren't even in interaction with, the relationship can loosen up even though you never behaviorally were around them again.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, my favorite one was the constellation I had with a mother who was just unrelentingly critical, just unrelentingly. And so I went to lunch with mom 3 days later. And not only did she not criticize me all lunch, which was a first, but spontaneously, unprompted by me, said, you know, hon, I'm not sure I've ever told you how proud I am of you. Like, did you survive it? I mean, like, that could have been death inducing. And again, I don't promise these things. I don't. And they're not the most common outcome. But they do happen, you know, or these constellations they do for kids. They're not in the room. And parents say, you know, he's just calmed down. He's doing so much better. Yeah. So it's the meaning that we were interacting with there that somehow non-locally affects beyond itself. But it is not objectively grabbing those people and, yeah. So anyway, and it's all mushy, but that's the way it's important to me, because otherwise we really can get into the manipulating chess pieces kind of thing. And that's not a good relationship with your larger system. It also lends itself to certain magical thinking about constellations, which is not the way constellations works either. Yeah.
That's helpful. Thanks.
Yeah. So with that, I've gone a little long. We probably got to take a really fast break though. So please come back 7:03, pee break, whatever you got to do. Come on back. 1 minute left. Okay, come on back. Come on back. Come on back. Come on back. One thing I want to say about everything I just shared is, and I do try to remember to say this from time to time, but there are times when I forget. I need to label this as Leslie's considered opinion. I do have colleagues who would disagree. And sometimes I want to reveal to you the breadth of opinion about certain matters in the constellations world. There are people who really do think we're manipulating the objects out there, who think that we are actually encountering the souls of the dead in a very specific kind of way. I just think it's so much more complex than that. I just think it's as Jung said, never literalize the images. And I think that, yeah. So I just wanted a full disclosure on this. You will meet other people and they will deal with these matters in a much more literal way than I will. I have friends, this terrifies me, but they use constellations to decide what stocks to invest in. I think this is absurd. I think it's as good as throwing a dart. But they swear by it. So, yeah. So I just wanted to let you know there's varieties of ways of understanding this out there, and you will be exposed to the broad. And there are many people who think differently about, say, this particular subset of the work, and I still respect what they do, and they still do really good work. Yeah. I just go, I disagree with you on that point. Okay, so I want to just say a couple of really quick words about what I call facilitator hygiene, which is, I just taught you one, right? How to set yourself up for support and your clients to be supported before you start. I don't want you to be maniacal or, again, in any magical thinking about facilitator hygiene, like to the point of superstition, like if I don't do X, Y, or Z, it's going to be terrible. I don't want it to be like that. On the other hand, there are things you can do to strengthen you in your stance as a facilitator, to lower the possibility of getting entangled with the client system, as Dinka was noticing. We'll just keep you more resourced through the process. So a big one, it really is putting on your own gas mask first and resourcing yourself. And I'm going to go into more detail on this in the residency when I get into group dynamics, but setting a good container. So having a clear beginning, a clear ending, making sure the group knows enough to know what they're doing, knows enough to have a sense of what they're up to, enough explanation, not too much, sweet spot, something like an opening ritual. Some of you will really want to do, I know people who like to do trumming and smudging and lengthy silences and meditations. And that's fine. When we get to the residency, I really, and your leading constellations are doing exercises, I really want you to experiment with the rituals you would like to have to begin, to end, to, yeah. And really experiment, try some things, be creative in a way that both serves you and strengthens you and sets a good sense of strengthening for the group. Yeah. And then generally you do want to have, amongst the other gabillion things you're tracking, you do want to try and be tracking for potential entanglement with the client. Okay. I want to share with you something I do for every Rouge Mondier evening. This is not going to work for your study groups and other formats, but it works for this format, which is I have already interviewed the clients. I have their trees. I have a sense of the direction I'm going in. So I know them a little bit. And as I drive there, I check in with each one. And what I'm checking for is, do I have any reactions other than kind of a nice, soft expectancy? No? If I'm like, ooh, oh, something I need to check. If I got cranky during the interview, if they were doing too much story, or they were doing too much blaming and I didn't like that, you know, and I can still feel it as I think of them. Yeah. If I'm having, how do you check for client entanglement? Check your reactions. If you're having much more than kind of a pleasant expectancy, you're probably dealing with some mix-up of some sort. Yeah. What to do about it? What I do in the car when I have some space and time and I'm not, other than driving, I'm not doing a billion other facilitator things. What I more or less do is I bow to the client's system and to my own system until it loosens. I may just in my mind's eye just kind of track the things I was reacting to. If it's something like, oh, I really didn't like the way she was blaming her mother. Oh dear, I'm gonna have to deal with blaming of the mother tonight. Yeah. Then I'll find some place in me to include, how to include blame. Which is it's an interesting move because usually blame is not what we want to do in constellations, right? That's not the ultimate goal, but it doesn't work by me just resisting it and trying to make it go away. Yeah. So if I can find a place where I can have a place in my heart for blame in the system and in my own system, that tends to clear things up. Oh, okay. I'm ready to go. Yeah. So I'm doing, it's a little individual to each client and each reaction. Ultimately, it's including and bowing to what is until I feel whatever it is release. And I've been doing this enough that now, within a couple of minutes, I usually find my way to it. And it's always useful because then I'm not starting out with I really hate the way she blames her mother. And then I'm trying to make myself not feel that way because that's bad as a facilitator, right? I'm supposed to be appreciative and like my client and not feel that way. Yeah. So I'm putting that aside and now I'm against myself and right? And it just makes it harder to facilitate. So that's some hygiene I do. I discovered that about 3 or 4 years ago, and it's so improved the quality of my constellations, let me tell you. Sometimes though, it doesn't happen until you're in the middle of the constellation. And all I can do is, once again, is just be noticing your reactions. Noticing your actions as you go along and do what you need to do to acknowledge and include them. I've been joking with some of you, but some of you may want to put a timer on your watch for every 5 minutes. Have the buzzer go off. You can tell your client you're doing it. And sit down and just return to yourself. No? Because by its very nature, the facilitating is kind of outward. You're looking at what's going on around, you're dealing with the client, you're dealing with the representatives, you're watching the interactions. Yeah. You can lose yourself. You can forget to tend to yourself. You cannot notice what your reactions are until you're getting snippy with people, right? Yeah, and then you're like, oh, that's not good. And then you try and clamp it down. Bad facilitator. And that doesn't work. Yeah. Yeah. So if you need to for a while, just every 5 minutes, sit down and going, oh, I'm getting cranky, or oh, I'm getting tired, or oh, I'm getting scared. Yeah, whatever. Include it. Include it. What you resist persists. I cannot underline this enough, particularly what's inside yourself. Include it. I feel right now like I'm going to fail the client and their whole lineage, and everyone's going to hate me, and no one's going to come to me for help ever again. I have some version of that thought almost every night I'm at Rouge Mondier. It's an old friend now. Oh, hello. Yeah. I don't exactly do that. Please, I'm not that resourceful. But I do recognize it. I don't react to it. I include it. I let it be. And I tend to have enough, muscle memory now that it disappears enough for me to get resourceful enough. And then if there's something I really need, then on the drive home, I can kick myself and be mean to myself and the things that I do, right? And put it off and process a little bit. Again, a good example is that Constellation with all the people coming in the door, and I was getting really frustrated. It was just like, what the fuck? And people were being so casual about it. Even afterwards, the guy in the wheelchair said, yeah, I was late because I was doing something I preferred. Got here when I was ready. I'm like, you little son of a gun. You don't know this is a sensitive and vulnerable group process. I mean, it was just striking. At one point I just went, and part of it, what really dissipated, I sort of managed it a few times, and managing's fine, but I really dissipated it when I finally turned to the group and I said to the group, if a few of you felt me being cranky when I let you in the door, I apologize, but I think that's part of the system, cranky about another fucking baby, and we could all laugh and it released. Yeah. I mean, I wonder how the mother felt when she realized she was pregnant again. Right. And so naming, acknowledging, if someone's spasmodically coughing a lot, it's very irritating for the group and can be very irritating for you. Just say, wow, I wonder what's up in the system that we've got someone here who's having a little hard time with their throat right now. I wonder how it belongs. And you may never figure out how it belongs, but by acknowledging and saying that it does, the whole system relaxes, you relax, you've just included.
Can I say another thing you did, Leslie? Because it really helped.
Yeah.
As an example, when the guy in the wheelchair came in, that was the most disruptive part of it, because multiple people had to move their chairs and get up, and like the whole, the representatives were forgetting who they were representing. Like, it was super disruptive. And then you asked him, could you square your wheelchair? And he said, sure, and I'll square my attitude too. And then you said, you took a pause, and I was kind of like, what are you going to do now? And because he was bringing into the room, there's some attitude here, because you hadn't yet acknowledged your crankiness about it. And then you said, attitude not required, but the wheelchair will make it easier for us to move around. And there was something about your saying you don't have to do anything with your attitude that just let the fact that lots of the room was pretty cranky about what was happening.
Yeah.
So really, that was a good example.
That was brilliant. Oh.
No, it helped me, because like I relaxed, because I thought I'm starting to get irritated here. And then I realized, yeah, this is all okay. Like that's allowed.
Yeah. And as people kept piling into the room, I just had to go, what's up? What's up, system? What the hell? There are times when the field sort of imposes things on the constellation that are just so in your face. You have to acknowledge the field is up to something. I mean, I don't, at a certain point, you can't keep interpreting this as simply,
Right.
rude people coming in by the
That
dozen.
felt mischievous,
Yeah,
like the field was being mischievous.
yeah, and it was wacky. Anyway, so these are just some strategies, and you will have these responses, and this is just facilitator hygiene. Taking care of yourself, noticing what's going on in yourself, including what's going on in yourself. You're not always going to have time to deal with it, but if you include it rather than push it away or judge yourself over it, you will stay resourceful. Okay? And every once in a while, your reaction will be the gift the field is trying to get you to see. Yeah? Okay. I'm going to try something that may be impossible, but I've got another format that I want us to try. But this one has to be done one at a time, which means that they have to be done very efficiently. Okay? So like really about 5 minutes each. So this is not going to be in depth. It's a format I want to teach you, and I also think you'll get something good out of it. But there's not going to be much talk or reporting out. So this is what I call my projection format. I discovered this when I did a workshop in New Zealand last year, and it was a big hit. The group all went, because there were all these projections going on, and I finally went, I wonder if I can come up with a format to deal with this. And everyone was like, this is great. So I want to teach it to you. Part of the reason is because issues around projection have been coming up in some of the one-on-one coaching. So I thought, oh, this is useful. So think about somebody in your life who you're having a big reaction to. A reaction that's probably out of scale to any actual offense or difficulty or conflict or whatever. Not your mom or your dad, okay? We're not dealing with your parents. Maybe dealing with a sibling, but probably not. This is co-worker, neighbor, someone in your circle of friends, someone at your church or your yoga circle, that kind of person. I've got someone on, I think I mentioned this last time, I got someone on Facebook. I'm like, there's something I'm projecting on the side, because every time he posts, I'm like, smoke out of my ears. Okay. Everybody got one? And you don't have to go first if you don't have one yet. In every constellation, there are going to be 4 representatives. Okay? You will represent yourself. Someone else is going to represent the person. So your boss, your coworker, whoever this is. Yeah. The third person is going to represent the projection. That is the person you're actually having the reaction to, kind of behind the mask of the boss or the coworker. Yeah. So the classic case would be you're reacting to your boss because he reminds you of your father. So in this instance, the second person would be your boss and the third person would end up being your father. You don't need to know what you're projecting. You can have a guess about that, but the field will reveal. Don't worry about that. In fact, this is more useful if you don't know. This becomes a more useful exercise. When you know you're projecting on your boss, you're 50% there already. And then the fourth person, the aspect of yourself, the shadow part of yourself that you have not integrated yet and which you're reacting to in this other person. So number 1 is you, Number 2 is the person you're reacting to. Number 3 is the person you're projecting onto the number 2. And number 4 is the aspect of yourself, the shadow part of yourself. And Kelly's about to explode. I can see her like going, too much, too much. Yeah, okay. So that means in every constellation, I'll be nominally facilitating, but mostly I'll just be directing, because there's really, you're not gonna, this is gonna be blind. You don't need to tell anyone who it is that you're having this reaction to. And we're not gonna really doing much reporting out. You're just gonna be having an experience inside yourself, okay? We can spend more time with it if we had more time with it, in which people would report out and whatnot. But we're not going to do that because we don't have that kind of time. Okay. So who would like to go first? Okay, Dinka, rose her hand. So Dinka, really quickly, choose someone to be the person. Choose, and we're just going to start calling them number 1, the person. Number 2, the person who's being projected onto that person. And number 3, the aspect of yourself.
Serena, will you be the person who I'm having problem with?
That's perfect. Yep, number 1.
Judith, will you be the person I'm projected, my projection? Yeah. And Grace, will you be my shadow part of myself that I haven't?
Okay, great, thank you. And so the way this is going to work is that to start out with, Dinka and Serena will stand and face each other. So you can go ahead and do that. Judith and Grace are going to get ready, but hold off. Stay seated for now. So Dinka, just look at this person you're having an issue with. Just notice what happens inside of you. And now, Judith, would you please stand up? And what I want you to imagine is that in a sense, she's stepping out behind Serena. So now the person can just be the person. And Dinka, you can look at the projection. And I just keep muting you, Judith, because there's a lot of background noise, okay? And just notice that number 1 is not the same as number 2. They're different. And notice if your reaction to number 1 changes at all. And then Grace is going to stand up, and we're going to imagine her in a way also like moving from behind Serena in the other direction. This aspect of yourself, Dinka. Now also separated from the person that you're having a reaction to. And notice if looking at number 1 feels different. Okay, let's bring it to a close. Everyone have a seat. Dinka, what was that like? Just say a word or two about that.
I was feeling angry towards the person. I was feeling warmth about the projection.
You're feeling what about the projection?
Like warm feelings, like, and to Grace, I was feeling soft, like you're soft.
And did it
But
change?
it didn't change my anger to the, it changed at the end. Maybe I started to feel it more neutral, like the anger changed to, okay.
Do you have a guess about who Judith represented?
My father.
Okay. So Serena, for just one moment, can you stand? And once again, Serena's going to represent number one. Okay, Dinka?
Mm-hmm.
And just say, you are not my father.
You're not my father.
And point over at Judith and say, that's my father.
That's my father.
Okay, you can sit down. How's that, Dinka?
Good.
Okay, excellent. Yeah. So if we were literally in the room together, what I would actually do is have lined up Serena. It's a little different here on Zoom. I'm working with a format on Zoom, but I would have had Judith behind Serena and Grace behind Judith. And then first I would have Judith kind of step to one side. And then the shadow part also, so that you can have a sense of pulling apart. Yeah. Excellent. Who would like to go next? And I think Judith, you had your hand up.
Okay.
Roles.
Dinka, will you be the person I'm having trouble with? And Kelly, will you be my projection? And Grace, will you be my shadow? Okay.
So Judith and Dinka start out standing. Hold on one second, Kelly. So Judith, just look at the person you're having an issue with.
Mm-hmm.
Just notice what that's like.
Mm-hmm.
And then imagine that Kelly steps out behind Dinka and she stands up as whoever is, in a sense, behind it. And then also slipping out behind Dinka is Grace, an aspect of yourself. Do you have the guess of who Kelly is representing?
I just got mixed up Dinka is the person I'm having a problem with.
Yep.
Kelly's the projection.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, probably my mom.
Okay. So can you look at Dinka
Mm-hmm.
and just say, you are not my mother.
You are not my mother.
And point at Kelly and say, that is my mother.
That is my mother.
How is that for you?
It softened.
Yeah.
Yeah, it softened my attitude towards Dinka.
Who's not even being Dinka, but yeah.
Oh, right. The person.
Yeah.
And it
understand.
made and Kelly, the person Kelly's representative, just got cut a lot of slack.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Ah, well, that's a really useful awareness. Have a seat, and I just want to make note of that. It's easier to stay in our negative states about people if we hide it under the guise of feeling it about somebody else.
Mm.
So I might not, consciously be enraged at my father, but I can be enraged at my boss. But once I've separated them out, now I have to look at my father. So having a projection keeps the feeling stuck. It can't move, it can't transform, it can't soften. Which is probably part of the unconscious strategy for keeping things the way they are, like not having to change my feelings about something. It's like we've triangulated someone unknowingly. Isn't that funny? Okay, Grace, Kelly, or Serena?
I have a question.
Yes.
When you first said choose somebody, I thought of somebody who I'm not really having like a conflict with or a
But it
negative.
doesn't have to be a conflict.
Okay.
Yeah, it can be any kind of intense reaction.
Okay.
That's why I'm trying to be neutral and say things like the person you have an issue with. It could be someone who, for some reason, generates unreasonable grief. Or it could be someone you have a ridiculous romantic obsession with.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It can be those as well. You
know?
I have somebody.
Okay. So you ready to go, Kelly?
Mm-hmm.
So choose the people, please.
Serena, would you represent me?
No, you're going to represent you.
Oh, damn it. Can somebody just please be me for the week?
That's so funny. A few years ago, I was having a really hard time at a training, and a teacher turned to me and said, because there were constellations that night, you seem kind of ragged. You don't have to come. And I said, are you kidding? Get to be someone else for a few hours? Sign me up. Anybody but me for a few hours.
Okay. I think, Serena, could you be my other person? And Dinka, would you be the projection? And aspect of myself. Judith, would you be the aspect of myself?
So Serena and Kelly stand.
All right, I'm me, right?
You are you.
Okay.
And just notice this person who you've decided to take a look at, you have an issue with. Just notice what your reaction is. And then imagine that Dinka is behind Serena and she steps off to the side. This is the projection. And then Judith, also from behind Serena, steps up and to the side, an aspect of yourself. Kelly, do you have any guesses who Dinka is representing, the projection?
There's something super familiar about the way she moved when she stood up. I mean, I can only think my mom, but I'm not really sure. And I'm not really sure if I'm saying that because it just seems like, yeah, I guess my mom, an aspect of my mom.
That's all it's got to be. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter too much if you're quote unquote wrong either. Yeah, it's
Okay.
what you're noticing right now. So just look at Serena and say, you're not my mother.
You're not my mother.
And then point at Dinka and go, that's my mother.
That's my mother.
And just notice what it's like to look at the original person. And what is it like to look at the person Serena's representing now?
It's a lot lighter.
Yeah.
It was a little bit more. Yeah.
Okay. Come on back.
Where are you placed? If we were in the room, where is the aspect of self going? Next to.
So literally all three of them are lined up. So in this one, it would be Serena facing you, with Dinka right behind her and Judith right behind her.
Oh, okay.
And so one of them moves in one direction and one of them moves the other direction. Just so it's like a fan opening.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah. I've also seen someone like, let's say, I'm representing the boss or whatever, and then this is the hand of the facilitator. Goes, okay, no, just whatever it is that you're projecting onto your boss, just move over here.
Okay.
And then, because usually in organizational constellations, you're trying to clean up your relationship with your boss. It's not deal with your relationship with your dad. It's there's something organizational that you're up to. So now the client can have a real interaction with the boss. Yeah. Doesn't even really matter what you've just separated out, but it's a nice kind of somatic thing. Yeah.
Is it also possible that we figure out the third person, the shadow, what exactly, like, what exact aspect of myself it is? Like, what?
Right. So in an ideal situation, we would spend more like 15 to 30 minutes on this. And you'd hear a little bit more from the shadow aspect and also your reaction to your shadow aspect. Very frequently what happens, as I think you reported, there's like a softness, like, oh, I need to bring you in. You're some part of me that I've rejected or thrown away. That's very frequently. And it sometimes can be quite explicit, like, oh, my anger, or the part of me I think that isn't valuable, or something. You know, yeah, but yeah, that can be part of the process. Yes. Yeah. Grace or Serena? Serena, great.
Okay. Grace, will you be my person, object? And then Judith, will you be the projection? And then Kelly, will you be the aspect, the shadow?
So Serena, look at this person you're having some issue with, some reaction to. Just notice what that's like. And then Judith is going to stand up as if she's right behind Grace and move over to the side. Notice what it's like to look at the person now that projection's been separated out a bit. And then Kelly, likewise, behind Grace, steps off to the side and reveals the aspect of yourself that wants to be integrated. Notice what it's like to look at the original person. And do you have any guess about who Judith is representing?
Yeah, I got that she was like all these really cool things about my mom that I forgot or didn't focus on.
Okay. Awesome. So point to the first one and say, "You're not my mother.
You're not my mother.
That's my mom."
That's my mom.
And it's probably especially tender for you to notice the parts of yourself that are wanting to be integrated. Those qualities as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to put a little icing on this for you, Serena. To the first person, just say, "Thank you for being a mirror for me,
Thank you for being a mirror for me.
but I'll let you be you."
But I'll let you be you.
I have a little bit of a presupposition that the people who show up to mirror us are at least a little bit in on the deal.
Mm.
Not 100%. It's not totally consensual. No, no. Okay, good. Thank you, everybody. Have a seat.
Thank you.
Una más. Gracias. Your turn, Grace.
Yes, let's find my mute button. Let's see. Serena, will you be my person? And Dinka, will you be my projection? And Kelly, will you be my shadow?
Okay. So Grace and Serena start out standing. Here, Grace, just notice what it's like to look at this person. And then Dinka will stand up as if she's right behind Serena and kind of separate herself out. Notice what, if anything, changes in the original person when you see these two separated. And then Kelly will also stand up as if she's moving out behind Serena. Be an aspect of yourself, Grace. Notice what it's like. It's any different? And do you have any guess about who Dinka is representing?
I think she's my dad.
So to the first person, can you say, "You're not my father"?
You're not my father.
That's my father.
That's my father.
How is that?
Both that person and my father, I liked better after they separated.
Yeah.
And I mean, I started out sort of over idealizing was the projection, but I actually liked them better when they became just regular people.
Ah, thank you, everybody. Have a seat. That is so helpful to me. That was really, I mean, that's just a nifty observation that projection serves to intensify the stuck feelings about the original person. It kind of like, it cements it. It makes it kind of unchangeable and unalterable. But once we can separate the projection a little bit, then we look not only at the original person, but at the, in this case, parents. Like, we see them as them, and something has room to change. And I've never thought of it like what the way in which projection serves to, in a sense, cement a certain reaction to the original person. Interesting. Okay, so any shares about any of that? Any thoughts about any of that before we move into our final debrief?
Do you guys know Harry Potter? Yeah. Well, it just made me think of a Horcrux. Do you know what I mean when I say that? Like the whole projection thing, like, because you put that, into the thing and it cements it and it gets thrown and hidden somewhere. And you got to go seek it out and destroy it.
When you know how you can make a Horcrux, you have to murder somebody.
Shit.
Remember it? So it all
No,
works.
I forgot that part, actually. Oh.
And that person's soul, that infects the person who's touching the Horcrux.
Yeah.
So it's like your projection really is actually in, like, there's parts of it that's influencing the person who you've got carrying this projection around.
Well, and very, very, very frequently, in the most intense versions of this, you're both projecting on each other. You're dancing in each other's fields. They're representing your evil mother, and you're representing their horrible father, and you cannot get out. So that's of course extremely common in partnerships. Not necessarily that intensely, but kind of the chronic patterns that the two of you can't seem to get out of, and you keep laying on each other. It's some cross projection going on. And it was obviously not a coincidence that all of these examples were parents. Parents are the most intense imprints, but it can be others. We can enroll people into our lost siblings.
I think it can even be us, like what we not like about us.
Well, and that's the other part of, the unintegrated shadow, the part of ourselves that's the number 4 role. But yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So in Serena's example, it seemed like it was a positive thing. So was she also like, can you be using this? Was she thinking about somebody who she's having an intense experience with, but it doesn't have to be negative. It could also be
Of course.
positive.
It could be a teacher that a therapist you're having a transference with.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those can be positive transferences. I don't know if that was for Serena, but you can use this for a positive projection. Positive in quotation marks, because projections are never, the outcome is never positive, but it can be, love or a sense of intense need, as I say, in partners, right? Yeah, there's usually, along with the healthy adult part of the bond, there's almost always some projections going on, projecting the ideal parent onto each other, that sort of thing.
And so, as you said, because we both project on each other, most likely.
Right.
I understand my projection, but the other person does not realize that, they're also projecting.
Yeah.
Can I, realizing my projection, entangle us, or it has to be also the other person who?
It kind of depends upon the relationship. You can do a lot on your own. I mean, you can do your own work. You can do your own, as Bert Hellinger puts it, you have to take your mother and take your father. Until you take your mother and take your father, you're going to be trying to enroll other people into the role, right? So you can do that work on your own. And if the bond's is exceptionally intense, as it is in romantic marriage, that sort of thing, if you're kind of not both in on the process of growth and healing, it's hard. It just is. There's a gravity pull to homeostasis in relationships, right? Having said that, I think we've all been in less intense relationships, like a coworker, something like that, where we've cleaned up our side of it, and they started being a sane person with us. Like, they really changed their behavior towards us because we addressed our side of the equation somehow. Yeah. So, as in most answers to these things, it's complicated, and it's always worthwhile doing our own work. Yeah. Like, when someone's just starting to recover in Al-Anon from codependency, they learn to do their own work, whether their partner stops drinking or not, and to stop hanging their hat on the other person changing their behaviors. So there is a certain degree to which you can do this on your own, but it is tricky business when you're in a household together, and it's intense. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to wrap it up here, my friends. A few ending little details. Reminders, who is doing the exercise? Remember, a 30-minute exercise, either the whole group or in small dyads and triads. Who signed up for the next residency? This is mine, your reminder. So Serena's one. Does no one else remember?
Next residency, December 5th. Yeah, that's me.
Okay, excellent. There's at least one more, because I know Anna offered to go to the second residency, I think.
You mean do her on the second, right?
What?
Anna did hers, was supposed to do hers this coming residency.
Is she?
I think so.
Okay, I'll double check. So Judith,
I wrote
Kelly,
it down.
and Dinka are under the impression that yours is for the second residency, yes? And
It's-
Dinka has no idea. She's
I
no
wrote it
idea.
down.
I think I'm for the third.
Why
Okay.
don't I do it for sure?
Yeah, I wrote it down.
Do you have it handy right now, Serena, or do you want
Yeah.
to email us later?
I have it. It's Kelly.
Oh, I'll volunteer to cover myself.
The reason why I wanted to remind us here is that means you've got a few weeks to think about it. Instead of showing up on Thursday morning going, shit. And then you've got to figure out how to fit in thinking about it. So again, 30 minutes, some kind of exercise, exploring chakras, exploring, projections. I mean, this is a format. You could do this. You could, put people into small groups, you and your heart. These are examples, not what you should do. I want you to come up with something new. And if you need any help with any of that, you let me know. It can be something the whole group does, or it can be something that you send people off into small groups to do.
It is a constellational exercise though, right?
Constellation exercise. Yes,
Not
we're in a
like-
constellation training.
We're not gonna, yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
And if you need any help with that, that's a good thing to bring to the coaching sessions. Also, everybody's going to have a chance to do an opening and a closing ritual. So just think about that. Again, I would like it to be somewhat constellation related. It can be integrated with another practice that you have, but try and give it a constellation-y zhuzh of some sort. Connecting with ancestors, connecting with aspects of self, whatever, okay? Next residency, December 5th through the 8th. That's the next thing we have to do together, except for the business folk who are meeting a week from tonight. Okay, so tonight we did some talk about study group. We spent a lot of time with the orders of helping. We did the support exercise. Then I talked a bit about facilitator hygiene. And then we did this final projection format. So take a moment, just remember the evening. What moved you? What insight really hit home? And just share what is a takeaway from the night?
You really can't facilitate solo.
I like it.
It's the opposite of that.
That's great. I love that. That's a tagline. That's good.
I'm still really floored by the what you were saying about we're only working with the meaning in the client's system, or the client makes of it, like the meaning of the client. Like I'm still sitting with that. I feel like that will be with me for a while. Yeah.
And I do want to say it can be, and it's almost always the unconscious meaning.
Unconscious meaning.
Yeah. But yeah, in the complexity of the client system, it's lodged in their system. Yeah.
Can you, and maybe this is a side thing, but is there any more resources or direction you could put me if I want to learn more about that?
Read Carl Jung.
Okay. Archetypal stuff? Archetypal stuff?
I'm trying, the opening chapter of Memories, Dreams, Reflections, his autobiography, really underlines this notion of, because he's talking in terms of dreams, so it's a different context. But he is trying to underline never literalize the images. And I first read that book in college, and I've never forgotten that. So if you have a dream of having sex with your brother, it doesn't mean you want to have sex with your brother, right? It's got symbolic meaning, right? And that's the level we want to work on with dreams. And I believe this extends to constellations as well. The reason why we get so tricked is that sometimes constellations show up so literally. And so we think of them as history enacted. And then we get ourselves in trouble. And that's when facilitators do things like, oh, the constellation has proven that your father isn't your biological father. Right? And people get really screwed up. Rather than saying, I don't know what's true, but something in the constellation seems to be showing forth the meaning that you're not your father's daughter. I wonder what that's about. It's a much more fruitful question. For us enlightenment folk, it's not as specific and concrete as, is my father my father? But actually the meaning question is actually the more fruitful one for the soul. Yeah. So anyway, I don't have a constellation reference for you. Carl Jung really is who's a tricky character, sleeping with his clients. Oh. But on this, I do really appreciate him a lot. So, and that's a book worth reading for anybody. For constellation facilitators, his autobiography, it's a great read. It's a really, really good, valuable read. Someone else, a takeaway for the night.
Serena, I'm with you. I'm both really intrigued and deepened in some questions. And in fact, Serena, if you ever wanted to have a phone call and just sort of explore it together, that question together, totally be up for it.
You guys can fight over this because I don't want you both to do this, or if you both want to do it, you have to do it separately. But can you imagine a 30-minute constellation exercise that explores this question? Yeah, a representation for literal truth and for symbolic truth. Yeah, I mean, I can already feel different ways of playing with this, right?
Serena, I already have an idea for my mini constellation, so if you want to do that one, you can do it.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, you can use constellations to explore these philosophical ideas, right? Yeah. What does it mean when we identify constellation dynamics as literal versus symbolic, and then see how they both feel? My guess is this one's going to feel better. There's going to be some more release. There's going to be more movement. There's going to be more gray areas, but also more freedom, something. But, takeaways.
Kelly, I'm with you. It was a very strong and wonderful reaction to be me as a client looking at me as a facilitator, and the take home is you miss the boat if you leave your ancestors behind.
These are great little sayings. This is awesome. And Dinka, your takeaway for the night.
I like what you said about if we notice ourselves that we are triggered by the client or how they react on, when they tell their stories, to bow to your system and to bow to their system, and include what the reaction is.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Excellent takeaways. Yeah. And this is just a pedagogical technique. Make sure you're leaving with something a little integrated, and you can take it with you. And you got to hear everyone else's takeaways, so you have each other's takeaways as well. So that is it for the evening. Thank you all. Beautiful work.
Thank you, Leslie.
I'll see some of you in a week, and the rest of you see at the next residency.
Thank you.
Or in a coaching call.
Bye,
Good night, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.